A double life has led me to unfortunate consequences. Living a double life turned out to be not as easy as it seemed at first. I tried to balance between the two realities, hiding one from the other, but sooner or later it was bound to lead to a collapse. And then came the moment when everything was revealed and came crashing down on me. I had always considered myself a fortunate man. It was as if fate itself was guiding me down the path of success. Since childhood, I was lucky in literally everything. Friends appeared easily, studies were given without much effort, and school successes strengthened confidence in their abilities. I was never afraid to take risks, and these risks almost always paid off. Already in my youth, I began to realize that I was ready to take any steps to achieve my goal. When I turned 25, I already owned a small company. This small startup quickly grew into a solid firm, and soon my income began to grow exponentially. At 35, I had a full-fledged business empire spanning several industries. Money was flowing, contracts were signing themselves, and connections were getting stronger by the day. It seemed that the whole world really lay at my feet. But behind this outward glow, there was another side of my life, one that no one knew about. Not my wife, not my children, not even my closest friends. This secret was so deeply buried that sometimes I myself forgot about its existence, but it always stayed with me, like a shadow following the light. I led a double life, skillfully balancing family obligations and work on the one hand, and my secret adventures on the other. My family saw me as a loving husband and caring father, a successful entrepreneur who was building a future for his loved ones. And at work, I was the charismatic leader who was respected and feared at the same time. No one guessed that behind these masks hid a completely different person, the one I tried to keep away from everyone else. My secret adventures were something of a second nature. They filled me with adrenaline, gave me a sense of freedom and power that I couldn't get in normal life. I was looking for thrills, new emotions that could not be experienced in the framework of the usual existence. This was my personal space where no one had access. But with each new step in this direction, I realized that the game was becoming more and more dangerous. The longer I led a double life, the harder it became to maintain the illusion of the perfect man I seemed to others. Anxiety grew inside me because sooner or later this lie was going to be exposed. But I kept moving forward, hoping that I would be able to control the situation to the end. It all started by accident. After another business meeting that ran late, I decided to relax a little. Usually I went straight home, but that night something prompted me to turn toward a bar near the office. The bar was quiet, semi-dark, with dimmed lights and a cozy atmosphere. I ordered a glass of wine and sat in the corner watching the people around me. And then I saw her. A woman sat alone at a table, cross-legged and holding a glass of red wine. She was older than me, but that didn't diminish her charm. Her eyes shone with a mysterious glow, and her lips opened slightly in a half-smile. I was magnetically drawn to her. I approached her, offered to join her, and she agreed. The conversation was easy, casual. She told me about her life. Her voice was soft and melodious, like music. Time flew by, and soon we were in the hotel room. That night changed everything. Although I was well aware that it was a mistake, I couldn't stop. She awakened feelings in me that I had long forgotten. I felt every cell in my body come alive, the blood pulsing in my veins. The next morning, I left her room feeling light and anxious at the same time. I knew I would come back here again. That's how my second life began. The nights spent away from home became something of a drug for me. At first, it was just a hobby, an entertainment, a way to get away from the routine of everyday life. I found excuses for my actions, convinced myself that everything was under control. After all, I'm a successful businessman who can manage any situation. But as time went on, things became more complicated. My passion for this woman became an addiction. I began to think about her day and night, dreaming of our meetings, anticipating every minute spent together. Work took a back seat. My family became just a background on which my real life was unfolding. She knew everything about my business, my family, my friends. Sometimes I felt like she knew things I didn't even realize I knew. She used this information to manipulate me, to make me feel needed and important, and she started demanding more attention, more money, more time. At first, I tried to resist, but I gave up every time. The fear of losing her was stronger than the fear of being exposed. Her demands became more and more insistent. She wanted me to spend more time with her, give her expensive gifts, fulfill her whims. I tried to explain that I had obligations, that I couldn't give up everything for her, but she wouldn't listen. There was only one thing for her: her desires. As time went on, I began to notice that I was losing control of the situation. My behavior became unpredictable. I made mistakes at work. I drifted away from my family. But the thought of losing her was unbearable. I kept playing this game, hoping I could find a way out, get things back to normal. But the further I went, the deeper I got into this swamp of lies and deceit. And then one evening, when I was going on another date, I got a call. It was my best friend who worked in security for my business. He informed me that he had information that could change my life forever. I froze, feeling my heart start to beat faster. Something told me this wasn't just a routine work problem. We agreed to meet in an hour at a small cafe near my office. We met at the cafe where he told me that someone has started digging into me. There are clear signs of surveillance and an attempt to hack into my personal information. Someone knows about my double life and is going to use this information against me. He couldn't say exactly who it was, but warned me to be careful. Those words hit me like an icy shower. It was a shock. Everything I had worked so hard to achieve for so long could collapse in an instant. I returned home that day trying to gather my thoughts. What to do, how to protect my family and my business. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, I looked at my wife and children and felt an invisible wall growing between us. They knew nothing, but I was beginning to feel the consequences of my choices. The night passed restlessly. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. Questions swirled in my head like a merry-go-round. Who is it? Why now? What do they want? How far are they willing to go? I lay in bed next to my wife, listening to her steady breathing, and thought about how far I'd come. I imagined how things might end if the truth came out. My thoughts rushed around like trapped animals. The next morning, I decided to take action. I called my friend and asked him to investigate further. I needed to find out who was behind this, and as soon as possible. But as time went on, there were no answers. Every day became a torture for me. I lived in constant fear, waiting for something irreparable to happen, and finally it did. One evening, as I was sitting in my office, a stranger walked in. He introduced himself as a private detective and said he worked for a man who wanted to talk to me. He suggested we meet tomorrow at a hotel in the city. I agreed, even though everything inside me was clenching. What would happen next? Who is this man? What does he know about me? The question swirled in my head, giving me no rest. The next day, I arrived at the hotel, feeling tension tighten every muscle in my body. The detective escorted me to my room where the man was waiting for me. He turned out to be an older man with cold eyes and a calm manner of speech. His appearance did not inspire confidence, but at the same time, he radiated a strange power that made you listen to every word he said. He got straight to the point, not wasting time on unnecessary formalities. His gaze pierced through me, and I felt the blood pounding in my temples. He claimed to know all my secrets, my adventures, and my second life. Now I had a choice. Either pay him a large sum of money, or he would tell my wife and partners everything he knew. I stood in front of him trying to gather my thoughts, but my head was spinning. I realized that any wrong move could lead to disaster. But at the same time, I felt that giving in to this blackmailer would be the beginning of the end. If I agreed to pay, he would control me for the rest of my life. At that moment, I realized it was time to make a decision. Either I would continue to live in fear of exposure, or I would take a step towards the truth. But whichever path I chose, the consequences would be irreversible. I took a deep breath and looked the man straight in the eye. The decision came naturally, as if survival instinct overrode all other emotions. I realized I could no longer continue this game. The lies and deceit had destroyed my life from the inside out, and it was time to put an end to it. I steadfastly refused to pay. Let it all come out. I didn't want to live in the shadows anymore. The man frowned, his eyes narrowing. He clearly hadn't expected such an answer. We stood in silence for a few seconds, sizing each other up. He asked if I was sure of my choice. I confirmed my decision. Enough hiding. He nodded, got up and left the room, leaving me alone. I sat down on the bed, feeling the tension leave my body. For the first time in a long time, I felt relieved. Perhaps there were difficulties ahead of me. Perhaps my life would change drastically. But I knew that this was the only right path. Now all I had to do was wait to see what would happen next.